Ata Yudaiti, Yeshia, Adonai, Yeshichem, Vanehu, Shmei, Kotchem, Vivuris, Yesha, Yimina, Eile Berechem, Vede Basusim, Anachnu, B'Shem, Adonai, Eloheinu, Nazgir, Hema, Koru, V'Nafolu, Anachnu, Kamnu, V'Naseilu, Adonai, Yeshia, Hamelach Yaneinu, Yem Karina. Second. If someone could take these booklets, there are some more. These are booklets that you can use them, write them if you want. Yeah. Yeah. I just want to finish what I was doing yesterday, going over reviewing the Maimon we just finished. What if I could have another Shahaka, New York, we wanted to do the questions. The questions are in the beginning on page 73. We're doing now. Good morning. Okay, 73B in the beginning of the Milcha workbook. The question where it says from pages, in this mimer, there aren't any chapters, so it's hard. So I'm going by the pages, from pages 12 to 21. One of the questions are, the main point is, what are the two processes that must take place when something Gashmis gets created?
Outflows from its source, and then the jump into.
Right. So one of the ishtalshalos, the evolving from its source, which goes through many, many levels to evolve, and the other is comes to a certain point where there's a gap. No matter how much it evolves, it would never evolve into Gashmis, and that's a different process of Yesh Mi'ayin. The next piece, why couldn't we say the world is just a figment of our imagination?
Like Torah said, gracious Father.
Right. Otherwise, all of Torah and everything would be just not true. That means there's no Esrog, there's no Lula, there's no Moshofar, nothing is real. What does it mean that Hashem exposes little finger and the angel expired?
Hashem were to shine a little bit more of his light into the Malach, and would be like,
Right. What principle do we derive from the halacha that a river that dries up once in 7 years is invalid for the paraduma?
that doesn't always exist, doesn't exist at all. That the world exists in our true existence, it's for 6 millennia, it will exist in 1 millennia, it will light come.
So if it's not eternal and eventually it will discontinue, and there's something that's responsible for its existence is not true. The only thing is with the paraduma, living waters, and by water, a cycle of 7 years is considered complete. So it's less than 7 years.
Doesn't that contradict the last question you answered? Like, isn't that saying the opposite?
And what?
Then why we can't say the world is Aren't those two principles that contradictory?
No, because we're saying the world is real. When we say that it's not emes, it's not that it's an illusion. It means to say that the truth of its existence doesn't belong to itself, but to its source. But the source does create it. Number 4, couldn't we say that the concealment, at least the concealment, the part that we don't see the emes and we perceive it as something separate, that is really separate from Hashem?
No.
Why not?
Because saying like God is capable of limiting, not infinitely limiting, I guess, but also limited.
Right.
He's the infinite and limited. That's true in thing.
Exactly. So that's one of the one of the main points in the Mimer that Hashem, who is infinite, cannot manifest not only in an infinite way, but when he manifests his presence in a finite way, that is an expression of him being infinite. And therefore, even the concealment is Hashem again. It's Hashem's infinite light concealing. On the next page, we have a summary, so I just want to go over that together. This is sort of the summary of the whole Mimer. And it's very hard to remember a Mimer like this by heart, but if you go over the summary, especially if you do it from time to time, you will remember what you learned in this Mimer. The Mimer explains the difference between Shituf and Avodah Zarah in the beginning. Then he explains how everything in the world has a source in the spiritual realm, and it evolves from the source through the process of tzimtzum. Then he gives examples. Trees come from the malachim. A lion comes from the merkava, from the chariot. Day and night comes from the angels, which are called srofim or ifanim. One says Kaddish, one says Baruch. Light comes from the Hashem's Talis and Atik. Earth comes from Malchus. Grass comes from Malachim, and the rooster comes from Malach Gabriel. Then he explains that everything in creation, even after evolving from level to level, myriads of stages, it still has to go through the process of Yesh Me'ayin. Once we understand that without the source, the world is non-existent, we can understand how the true identity of the world is Hashem's creating force. When you look at this, you can just see a little bit the flow of the Mimer. Number 5, even the concealment in this world is not separate from Hashem. This in itself is Hashem's koyach hagvul, Hashem's power to conceal, which is really one with his power to reveal. When we say the world is totally bottled, it doesn't mean that it's non-existent. It means that it has no independent identity outside of Hashem himself. The true meaning of Ein Oid Muvadei, as explained above in number 7. What does that mean? I don't know. What did I write?
Which page?
This, the 73. This is in, no, this is the workbook. So I just want to add, after reading all this is generally speaking the difference between us and tzaddikim, at least one of the differences. The rooster comes from Malach Gabriel and goes through all those involvements, but I guarantee you the rooster has no clue where it's coming from and everything that goes on behind it. He's a rooster. That's how we are also. We're like roosters in that sense, that we come from here, from there. Things are happening around us. We don't see any connection to something on a higher level. We see what's happening with Gashmis. In fact, we know how it's connected to certain natural reasons why it's happening. That's why it's raining. That's why it's hot. That's why it's cold. That's why there's a hurricane. But we have no clue of what's going on in the spiritual realm that leads to this. Tzaddikim, everything that's going on, they see both worlds. They see what's happening here, and they see what it says in the Mimer, how things evolve from there. And not only that, they themselves openly are connected to what's going on in a higher realm. You remember, there's a famous quote from the Rebbe Rashab, that the Rebbe, I don't like repeating something over and over, but this is just so relevant to what we're talking about, that the Rebbe Rashab said, there's no doubt in my mind that when the Alter Rebbe lifted his right hand to stroke his beard, that at that moment in Atzilus, Chesed of Atzilus went up to Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikna. What does that mean? Actually, the Maimon we're going to learn now explains Our beard, what's the spiritual source of a beard? Because it says in the Navi that Hashem has a white beard. So obviously it's a metaphor for a certain level. Whatever that level is, that's the spiritual source for the beard down here. The right hand comes from Hashem's chesed, because it says Hashem's right hand is chesed. So when the Alter Rebbe, who was so connected to the spiritual realm, lifted his right hand to stroke his beard, then up there, chesed of Atzilus went up to that level. And the same with everything that a tzaddik does, tzaddikim of this caliber, every movement, every nuance, everything they say, it's all connected to, and it's all the manifestation of what goes on in a higher spiritual realm. One example of this in Chumash, like right now, there's a war going on. We know the reasons for the war, the Hamas, and they're this, and they're that, and we gave them land, and we didn't realize, at least the people who are in charge of the government thought that, you can make deals with them, and the nicer you are to them, the nicer they'll be to you. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. But really, whatever goes on down here is a result of what's going on over there. So when the Rebbe, for example, would say during the 6-Day War, the Rebbe came out, that was the first time the Rebbe introduced the first mitzvah, which is mitzvah tefillin, is because the Rebbe saw what's going on up there and how the war down here evolves from up there. And he knows what you need to do up there in order to make things change down here. So just to give an example, this is something which is not in Kabbalah, it's not in the Zohar, it's actually Rashi and Chumash. And Shira, if you don't mind, this is a pasuk in Chumash Devarim. It's Perek 2, chapter 2. It's pasuk 31. And this is talking about the Yidden having their confrontation with one of the nations, which is called Sichon. So look at pasuk 31. And Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, and Hashem said to me, behold, I have begun to deliver Sichon and his land before you. Begin to drive him out, that you may inherit his land. What does it mean, I already have begun? The war didn't start yet. What does it mean, I've begun? Look what Rashi says. God pours down the guardian angel of that nation, which is Amori, from the 7 nations, from above. He put him underneath Moshe Rabbeinu's foot, and he made him step on his neck. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu saw that he already defeated the nation. He didn't defeat, the war didn't start yet. The next pasuk says, Sichon went out to fight with them. So what happened here? Here he fought with the source up there, the angel. And he basically trampled on him. And now, when the war will take place, they're going to be defeated. So let's say you were watching Moshe Rabbeinu, you see him stamp his foot. He'll be upset about something. Why he stamp his foot? I have no clue that all this is going on in a higher spirit. And this is also, also zilch compared to what we could understand, what really is going on. This Rashi says one word. Okay. So I think we're going to start now the next mimer. So those of you who want to use the books, you can use the books. Otherwise, we have, and you can write in them. Otherwise, we have workbooks here that are separate. But let's start. So this mimer is a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek, and there's a sefer that the Tzemach Tzedek wrote, Maimorim, and the real original name of the sefer is Taima HaMitzvahs, the reasons for the mitzvahs. In other words, just like there are Sfarim, like the one that I don't know if you started yet, but in the dorm, Friday night, did you start learning the Sefer HaMitzvahs of the Chinuch? Yeah. That was, I don't know if Mrs. Rodel mentioned it, but that's something which we wrote the Rebbe that every Friday, this is years back, every Friday night, after candlelighting, we learned something together. So the Rebbe wrote, you should learn the Sefer Mitzvahs in the Chinuch, which is interesting because this was after the Rebbe already came out with learning Rambam, which is the same thing, all the mitzvahs. But the Rebbe specifically wanted the girls to learn Chinuch. What's the difference between his Sefer and the Rambam Sefer? His Sefer is unique in the sense that he gives a reason for each mitzvah. And of course, the reason behind everything is much deeper than what we can comprehend, and there are things that are beyond reason, but every mitzvah, it says something that it should somehow or other be able to register in our brain what's behind this mitzvah. So he explains the mitzvahs and the reason for the mitzvahs on a gashmizdika level. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains the reason for the mitzvahs on a spiritual level. Like, why do we do this mitzvah, that mitzvah? He doesn't cover all 613, covers quite a bit. So that later when the Sefer was published, they called it Derech Mitzvah Sefer. That's the name of the Sefer. And one of the mitzvahs are the mitzvah that a Torah, a person who has leprosy, he has to cut his hair. And he's going into this idea, he's going to explain the whole idea of Api Chassidus, Api Kabbalah, the union of hair. So let's start. So first of all, like everything else, and all the other Maimar, in the back of the booklet, you have the actual pasuk, so you can see it inside. Look at page 58. This is Parsha Mitzorah, talks about someone who has leprosy. And leprosy is something that makes a person tummy, he's impure. And there are a lot of halachas how to diagnose that it's really impure. And what happens if it is impure? He has to be locked up, for how long? But what happens after he becomes pure? So then it says in this pasuk Ches, the chibas hamatar is begodov. The person undergoing purification shall wash his garments. The gilach has kol sara. He has to shave off all his hair. All the hair in his body has to be shaved. Barachas b'mayim, and then he will purify himself in water, and he'll become purified. And then he can come back to the tent. The yashuv v'kusla'ol shevus yomim. He has to still remain outside of the tent for 7 days. So part of the process of purification is to take off all his hair. That's what he's starting with. And this is the pasuk. Razal, our sages say, Shloisha Megalchin. There are 3 people that have an obligation to cut their hair. The Tikalach and mitzvah, and cutting the hair is a mitzvah for them. Who are the 3? One is Nazir. What is Nazir? Nazir is a person that makes a vow and says, I take upon myself to become a Nazir. If he says those words, so for the next 30 days, he has the status of a Nazir. And a Nazir is a Parsha in a Chumash, Parshas, in Parshas Nasoi. It talks about a Nazir that he's not allowed to drink wine, he's not allowed to go to a cemetery now that it become impure. And one of the other things is he's not allowed to cut his hair for 30 days. After 30 days are over, he can cut his hair. So one is the Metzorah, the other is the Nazir, and the third one is Leviim. The Leviim have to cut their hair. Ulam, however, Shloisha Elu, all 3 of these things, Einum Shavim L'chol Dorei. They're really not identical. There are differences between the Metzorah cutting his hair, the Nazir cutting his hair, and the Levim cutting their hair. What? Shegilu Chalavim, this mitzvah that the Levim have to cut their hair, this is not a mitzvah that applies today, and it didn't apply in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. It was only L'shah, B'midbar, V'ein, and the Heges L'Geres. It was only a mitzvah that applied in the time that the Yidden were in the desert, but not something which applies to all generations. Well, that's why it's not considered one of the 613 mitzvahs. There are a lot of commandments in the Torah, and they're not part of the 613 mitzvahs. So the rule is, where the Rambam puts it, that only mitzvahs which are for all future generations, those are the ones that are the 613. Those that were given to us in certain times as a temporary mitzvah, those are not counted. In fact, one of the reasons that is given why Korach was upset at Moshe Rabbeinu and he was upset that the Moshe Rabbeinu dealt with things that he was a Levi, and he said that everyone has to cut their hair. In fact, the word karach in Hebrew also means bald.
Mom.
Karach.
Cool. Yeah.
But obviously, it wasn't just about physical beauty or physical appearance. There's something more going on here. Giluch mitzvah, cutting the hair for the mitzvah, and cutting the hair for the nazir. Those two, the hegnas l'deiros, they are practiced at all future generations. And therefore, shouldn't be confused. By the way, I want to just say, on top of the line, they're putting it the way it was in the original. On the bottom, we just follow it because he gives the translation. So it's line by line. The only thing is it starts on the left side and goes to the right side, so not to be confused. If you have any doubts which way it goes, because you're going to get confused, just look at the numbers in the bottom and watch the sequence of the numbers so you know which way it goes. Because if you look at the numbers at the top of the page, 102 comes before 103.
Oh.
But I'm following the line by line, and that goes from left to right. We're fortunate that there are, I think, 2 volumes of this book, this Sefer, which my mother was translated in English. V'ikoch mona mitzvah geluch hanozer gamke mitzvah. U'chelik b'mitzvah shin ayin zayin. So when the chinuch, when he counts the mitzvahs, mitzvah 377, part of it is the mitzvah that a nazir has to cut his hair, because this is something which is a commandment given for all future generations. Ukiyatama, what happens if the nazir becomes impure? In other words, that there are 2 times when the nazir has this commandment to cut his hair. One is during the 30 days, he's not allowed to cut his hair. After the 30 days, it's a mitzvah to cut his hair. But also, he's not allowed to become impure. What happens if he does become impure? He comes in contact with a dead body. He has to start counting the 30 days all over again. And when he does that, he has to cut his hair and start all over again. So there's 2 times where the nazir has to cut his hair. One is when he finishes counting, and the other is the counting is interrupted because he became impure, and he has to start all over again. He also has to cut his hair under those circumstances. But so the nazir only cuts his hair only in these 2 situations, either at the end of the 30 days, or if he becomes impure. Turn the page. So remember, we're going from left to right, so it's 105. So even if he didn't finish the 30 days, but it became Tameh, and we have to start counting all over again, it's a mitzvah to cut his hair and bring a korban. Then he has to let his hair grow again. How long? Minyan kol yemei azirus, for the 30 days. The reason why it doesn't say the word 30 days, because it doesn't have to be 30 days. A person could also be a nazir for 60 days, for more days, if he explicitly says, I want to be, but the average, and especially if he doesn't spell it out, it's for 30 days. But remain Nazir, when he is a Nazir, he's not allowed to cut his hair. So it's an interesting thing. What is hair positive or is hair negative? If it's positive, then why does he have to cut it when his 30 days are over? If it's negative, then why does he let it grow during the 30 days? So we see an interesting thing. The same person's hair during the 30 days, it's a mitzvah to let it grow. After the 30 days, it's a mitzvah to remove it. Like it says in mitzvah Shin Ayin Gimel, mitzvah number 373, Shelo yigalech sar kol yemei nizra. He's not allowed to cut his hair as long as he is a nazir. Shenemar, it says in the Chumash, Sar le'yavel aresha, a razor shall not pass over his head. V'adrabah mitzvah she'gadol sar. It's a mitzvah to let the hair grow. Meshikosav mitzvah shinayim dalid, mitzvah 374, she'yagdol sar kol yimei nivri. So he gives a few numbers here because there are a few mitzvahs. One mitzvah is you must let the hair grow when he's a nazir. One mitzvah is you must cut the hair when he becomes tamei. Another one is you must cut the hair when the days of nazir ended. And the pasuk says, Kodesh Yiya Gadol Pera Sarveshim. His hair is holy. He shall let the locks of his hair and his head grow. So the question is obvious. Why is it for a Levi it's supposed to be cut? And even that only then, not in the future. For the Nazir, sometimes it's supposed to be cut, sometimes it's supposed to be this. A Mitzvah is supposed to cut the hair for purification. So it must be something about hair that fluctuates one way or another. How does it work? The next piece is a little bit, or a little bit more than a little bit Kabbalistic. So I am going to skip it. And we're going to go to page number, on top of the page, we would say 111. We're using the Hebrew English Derech Mitzvah Sefer, Mitzvah Tegalakas Mitzvah, those who are listening online. Ha'inyan. In the Metzinu, we find the Torah, Pam Higdiya minus Asiris B'Ma'id. There are times when the Torah attributes greatness to hair, spiritual greatness. Like it says by Nazir, the words of the Torah is Kodesh Yia Gadol Pera Sar Roshem. His hair is holy, and shall let the locks of his hair grow. Also by Shimshon, we know that one of the great leaders of Israel, he was a judge, his name was Shimshon. He was very powerful, physically strong. He's the one that took those doors off of Gaza and he made the place collapse. But his whole kaych was inside. I don't know if you learned the story in Tanakh, that he was a Nazir. He wasn't allowed to cut his hair. And that was his strength. Once he cut his hair, then he lost all the strength. So there we see the hair was positive. The hair gave him strength. Page 110. Otherwise, we find cases where the Torah puts down the hair. Canal being a mitzvah, like the Torah says by mitzvah, hair has to be cut. A Levium, by the Levium, the hair should be cut. The same thing I would say, just say in reference to a married woman, Sar Be'isha Erva, that if the hair of a woman is exposed, that's considered Erva, it's considered inappropriate. So what is the difference? Why in one case it's positive, in one case it's negative? The same thing, it's hair. And we also find this distinction in the spiritual realm. He cited that Tika Kadisha, a Makar Chayes Kalayim, the hair of Atika Kadisha, the source of the vitality of all the worlds. What does that mean, the hair of Atika Kadisha? So again, we said before that in Tanakh, I said this in the other mimer, but maybe we have the pasuk here that you could see it inside. But it's the pasuk in Tanakh where it says and describes Hashem, and he has a beard and he has hair. So this is on page 64 in the book. Take a look for a second. I think I did show it to you in the other mimer. Atik Yaimin. I forgot to underline it in English, so sorry. So it's pasuk 9. It starts off, I watched as the throne was set up, and the one of ancient days, which is Hashem, his throne was fiery flames, its wheels blazing fire. Oh no, his garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. Hashem doesn't have a physical head. He doesn't have physical hair. So obviously there's a level up there which is called hair. And being that it says the word Atik Yamin, is the level which is in Hasidus or Kabbalah referred to as Atik. Where's Atik? On the map? Remember where it is? Then we have a little map here too. What's above Chokhmah? Yeah, look at page 57, so we don't have to, you can see it inside. You said Malchus? The Malchus is the tenth sphere.
Right, but Malchus from the world was before it, but before that.
So what's above Chokhmah Vatzilus? What's above Chokhmah? Ein Sof. So this Ein Sof is also called Keter, Kesa, which means a crown. In the crown of Hashem, there are two levels. If you look on top of the page, the one level is called Atik Yemin, and those words come from this pasuk. The other level is called Arich Ampin. And the difference is Atik Yemin is Pnimius HaKeser, which means the inner layer of Keser, and Arich Ampin is the external layer of Keser. How would that be corresponding to a person? Atik Yemin is Tainug, which is pleasure, and Arich Ampin is Ratzon, the willpower. Like in a person, pleasure and willpower, that's what makes everything be the way it is. In other words, we know that the willpower is higher than all the faculties in a person. Willpower controls the intellect, the emotion, physical action, thought, speech, action, even intellect, which is the highest faculty we have, but it's still affected and controlled by the willpower. There's a famous Gemara that says, "La'olam yilmid adam b'makom sheli b'chafetz." A person should always study Torah in a place that their heart desires to study Torah in that place. What does that mean? There are two interpretations. One, it means geographically speaking, that if someone wants to study in a certain yeshiva, and there's an option to study another place, they should choose the place that their heart is drawn to that place. The other interpretation, it's not talking about a geographic location, it's talking about a subject. Which subject of Torah do you want to study? Study the subject that you have a feeling for it and that you have a desire to study it. Why? Because if it's something that you want to study it, then the willpower will enhance your brain and the functioning of your brain. The willpower will make your brain work much better. So will has an effect on all the different faculties. But how come one person wants this and another person wants that? The answer is pleasure. Some people enjoy quiet, so they want to live in a forest somewhere where no one else is around. And some people love noise. I remember once had a student that her parents came from San Diego, it's in California. So the father, he grew up here in New York. The mother grew up there. She said she can't wait to get back home. She can't take it, the noise. She can't handle it. The father said, I love it. The beeping of the horns and the noise and the traffic and like over there, it's so quiet. I mean, certain people just enjoy different things. So therefore, if a person chooses, I want to build a house this way, and someone says, I want to build a house that way, why? Because this is what I enjoy, and that's what you enjoy. Why? That's just the way I am. I don't know why. That's just what gives me pleasure. So pleasure determines what I want, and what I want has the effect on all my faculties of thought, speech, and action, intellect, and emotion. So these two things, pleasure and will, are higher than the chokhmah. In the spiritual realm, that's atik yemen and arich ampin. So when it says, for example, that Shabbos is a day of pleasure, that means on Shabbos, this level of atik yemen shines in this world. So here it says that atik yemen has a beard. That means there's hair on the head. That means that there's something spiritual, which we refer to as hair, metaphorically, of atik yemen, and that seems to be something positive. Where are we? On page 111. So there it says that the hair of atik yemen That's actually the spiritual source that gives vitality to all the spiritual world. So it's a positive thing. Page number 113. Ki Abba Rashis Atzilus, Yenik Mimazl Shmini Keneda. Here's again a line of Kabbalah. But this is the source that all the worlds get their nurture from the here of Atika Kadisha. I will explain it later, so don't worry about it. We'll explain what I mean. They get their chayes from the hair. Mashenk inside is the nukva, but the hair, spiritual hair that comes from the sphere of Malchus, yesh mem unikas achitzayim. That's a place that the external forces, which means klipas, have the ability to nurture from that source. From Atika Kadisha, that hair gives positive life and positive sustenance to all the worlds. The hair in Malchus could give, and leaves room to give chayes also to Klippa. So how do you explain it? It says that hair in the head is excess intellectual energy. In other words, the brain is the place where the highest level of the neshama's energy is found, and the hair is as if to say that energy, there's an overflow of that energy, excess, and it overflows, and from there the hair grows. So before the bell rings, let me just say one word. Hair, Hair, is another word in Kabbalah for tzimtzum. So why don't we just say tzimtzum? The answer is because it's not an ordinary tzimtzum. It's an extremely exceptional tzimtzum. It's excessive tzimtzum. To just leave you with one word, and then tomorrow we'll explain more. In the human body, there are different organs in the body, and each organ has the capacity to contain in it a different power of the neshama, some higher, some lower. Let's say the brain. The brain can contain in it intellect. The hands, the feet, the legs, they can't have intellect in it. So the brain is a vessel for something higher. And these parts of the body are considered lower in that sense. They don't have any special talent or don't have the same power like the intellect or the emotion, which is in the heart. But the truth is, even the lowest part of the body, which would be not just the foot, but the heel of the foot. Why is it the lowest? Because it feels the least pain, is the least sensitive. That part of the foot still has life to it. In fact, if you take a knife and you cut it, it's going to hurt. With hair, you see a strange thing. There's life there because the hair grows, but you can take a scissor and cut it and you feel absolutely no pain. Not because it's detached, it's attached, it's growing. So how could you not feel pain? How could you cut part of your body and not feel pain? And the answer clearly is that the chayas in the hair is so minimum and is so concealed and so hidden, it's as if it doesn't exist, and therefore you can cut it and not feel any pain. So therefore, when you think of hair versus the rest of the body, the tzimtzum of the chayas in hair is much greater, much more intense than any other part of the body. And that's what he's going to talk about in the Maimon. That hair represents excessive tzimtzum. Now it depends what's going through the process of tzimtzum. If one level goes through process of excessive tzimtzum, it's a positive thing. Something else goes through a process of excessive tzimtzum, it's a negative thing. And that's where we're holding, to be continued tomorrow. Okay.
It's a negative thing.
What?
That when that chemical occurs, it can be either positive or negative.
Excessive tzimtzum could be positive or negative depending on what the circumstances are.
Okay.
Where it's